Welcome to a new edition of Harness Central. I'm Harold Howe, and we're here with Hugh Mitchell at, I guess, what used to be Western Fair Raceway, and now you call it Western District or
Western
Raceway.
Fair District.
Western Fair District, all right. Hugh, we're here to have a candid conversation about not what has happened to racing with the announcement about the slot program, but to move forward. We do have a fair bit of information, but you can maybe put a finer point on it because you had a meeting with the OLG as some of the other track operators have. What can you enlighten us with insofar as what we're looking for over the next 100 days, let's say?
Well, we had our meeting, as you had indicated, with the OLG, as every racetrack in the province will have a meeting, if they haven't already, with the OLG in the next couple weeks. Really, there's as many unanswered questions, frankly, as there is answered questions. But what we do know going forward is there is a critical path that's been outlined to take us from now till April 1st, 2013. Really encompasses three phases. One, a request for information phase, which will begin within the next couple weeks, might go another month or two, and it's where the OLG will seek information from all sectors and all shareholders and stakeholders in the business.
Does that include the people racing horses?
That I can't say. I think for the most part, it does include racetrack operators. It does include gaming operators. But I can't say whether it does or doesn't include other parts of the racing industry.
Chances are it won't, I would think. You correct me if I'm wrong, because in the existing slot or site agreements, I guess they're properly called, it was between the track operator and the OLG.
That's correct. It is a site holders agreement that's between the two parties, us being the racetrack and them being the OLG. Then going on, the second phase would be a request for quote or qualifications, if you will, where the OLG will ask you to submit, if you're interested in bidding on a site or a location in a gaming zone, on a license. And so there'll be some qualifying factors that you'll have to go through to be able to qualify to receive an application, if you will, and that's the third phase, and it'll be defined as a request for proposal. And that phase might begin early to late fall, where the request for proposal will be sought from those interested in applying for a license. We don't know exactly how long that will take in working through those applications and awarding.
60 days wouldn't be an unrealistic term.
Oh, I think it'll be well over that, Harold. It'll be. I think their aggressive goal is to have a good many of those RFPs dealt with by April 1st, 2013. But that, admittedly, for them as us, may not be realistic given the logistics and the amount of groundwork that has to be done between then and now, between now and then. Sorry. So that timeline is not clear, but what is clear, the phases that will go through, and that the first phase will begin within a month or so.
When you walked out of the meeting wearing your Western Fair hat, did you have a feeling of confidence or uneasiness?
Well, I guess I had a feeling of both. I mean, we weren't surprised, and frankly, I think none of us should be terribly surprised with what's evolving in the gaming environment here in Ontario, and knowing that the government has a $16 billion deficit to deal with, and knowing how our gaming agreement with the OLG was constructed and how it's been going for 13 years. I don't think realistically we should be surprised that there's that as part of the evolution of the gaming environment and landscape in the province, that there's changes were inevitable. I think what surprises us is that there seems to be an excommunication of live racing from the OLG's gaming model. That would appear, and that may be unfair, but from what I see, that's disappointing. But I'm hopeful, as a matter of government public policy, that there'll be some consideration given in due course to racing in another way. But it's clear the OLG's mandate is specific around gaming, and so their discussions to us were specifically around gaming and what the potential ahead might be. I mean, I'm an optimist. Nothing so permanent as change. The winds of change are blowing fiercely, and not just in our industry, but in general in the economy across Ontario. So we can't necessarily control or direct the winds, but we can adjust our sails. And so from Western Fair's perspective, we're going to, going forward, try and adjust our sails. If there are opportunities, we're going to seize them to the best of our ability. And we're focused on moving the business forward rather than looking back.
How important to the business model for Western Fair is the current revenue sharing agreement for slot machine money?
It's very important, and from two fronts. First of all, from the financial front, I mean, there's some significant revenues generated, $10 million to be exact, off gaming that comes back to this track at this site. And that's half our overall revenue at this site. So it's very significant from that perspective. So going forward, we're going to have to look at altering and amending and changing our business model, whether we're in gaming or not. The second piece, though, which is an important piece for us as a not-for-profit ag society, is that horse racing is a key part of our agricultural mandate. And if we're not able to financially support horse racing going forward, in my mind, that compromises our agricultural mandate, and that's not what we want to do. But there's two major impacts on this association.
Your point earlier about the government essentially wanted to divest itself of horse racing. Right? I had one person say to me, it appears that the Ontario Lottery Corporation Lottery and Gaming is an Ontario government agency. The Ontario Racing Commission is an Ontario government agency. And based on what we're seeing, the Racing Commission appears to have, I guess, been excommunicated, and they're almost being treated like the idiot child you've got that you hide in the back room when visitors come. They have met with the breeders, they've met with racing people, and basically said, there's nothing we can do. You have to come up with a new game plan. And I did an editorial, and these weren't necessarily my ideas last week about, a new organization for racing to self-run itself, if you will. Is that an idiot idea on its own?
Good question. Me and you have had our differences over the years, but on this front, no, I don't think it's lunacy to think that there's going to be a significant change in the live racing model or the pari-mutuel racing, pari-mutuel wagering on live racing model in this province. It's going to be dramatically different come April 1st or soon thereafter of next year. And the notion of trying to drive some efficiencies, trying to drive some more effective use of human and financial resources into the model by trying to consolidate and contract your bricks and mortar model for pari-mutuel into urban centers. That's inevitable if we're to survive. We have to be thinking about a more consolidated, a highly rationalized industry. The industry will not be kept whole. I hate to say it. It pains me to say that. But realistically, the industry will not be kept whole as a result of this. There's going to be significant changes to each and every one of us. There's going to have to be some painful decisions. And I think, yes, the industry will have to work together more than ever before. Going forward, under these adverse conditions, live racing has got to put behind them any confrontations or fights or disagreements they've had before, and those that remain are going to have to work together like they've never worked together before, sharing and giving in order to sustain some critical mass for parimutuel going forward.
The breeders in this province who listen to this are going to say, nice speech, Hugh. But you know what? We're on the front line.
Yeah.
And we're just about ready to throw the rope over the tree branch and end it all. This isn't your call, obviously, but what do those people do, and what does the game consider doing in trying to save them, and maybe the cornerstone for racing in Ontario, the Ontario Sire Stakes?
Yeah, I mean, you make some good points. I have great empathy for the breeders' circumstances today. They're the ones that are first up on the beachhead in this change, and they're being affected as we speak. Yes, it appears that everything's on the table with relate to live racing going forward, and I don't know how to advise. I really don't. If I had those answers, I'd share. But I can only appreciate how difficult it is for the breeders. And people questioning whether they should continue to invest in this industry. And I think that's why, hopefully through Araya, but we very quickly start to get the government to talk to us about what will remain within the current framework of our industry so that we can sort of plan around that. And the biggest challenge for us today is not knowing. And so specifically for the breeders, that I can see it being a huge issue. And, without the breeders, live racing, parimutuel, really requires a sustainable and consistent supply of quality horses, and it really starts with the breeders. So they're an important piece of this whole puzzle. And I honestly am as frustrated as they are in knowing what to say or do.
Well, let's speculate. Just hypothetical guess. Half a dozen tracks left?
Well, I think you put me on the spot a little bit, but I've been preaching, and others have as well, for some time now, that the live racing model and distribution model of 17 racetracks across this province is antiquated. Frankly, it was antiquated in the mid-'90s when we were on the ropes before the tax reduction and then the slots at racetrack program. And we created, over the course of the last 15 years, some false economies for ourselves, and here we are dealing with it again. But whether it's 6, 7, or 8, what I know for sure, it isn't 17. It isn't anywhere near 17. It's probably half. And someone can just take a pen and go look at the urban centres across Ontario and for themselves start to discern fairly quickly how many markets for parimutuel will remain. And that's for the big bricks and mortar part of it. But I think, like the OLG, we ought to be, and we have made some inroads this way, at least Woodbine has, in really exploiting the online gaming piece. So we reach all corners of the Ontario market with the internet as a means of trying to sustain as much parimutuel as we can.
Live race dates cut by 30% or more?
Oh, well, I hate to say that, but that might not be enough when it's all said and done. And I think the key point going forward, I always refer to it as parimutuel wagering on live racing, not just live racing, because adding the parimutuel component to that term suggests that we would be market driven. And I think if nothing else, we ought to have learned that through all of this, that going forward, any model we build will have to be focused on being customer driven and letting the market decide how we operate and to what extent we distribute this product.
Ontario Sire Stake money is a big issue out there. It sits presently at roughly $20 million. Slot revenue is responsible for approximately half of that.
Yep.
So we know for 2012 we're good. 2013, we got 3 months before the contract ends. What's the number?
Yeah, it's again, Harold, a good question. I don't know what that number is. I honestly don't. And, we may be fine for 2012, but the truth, as most of your viewers know and you do, that decisions about 2013, 2014, and beyond are even being made as we speak because of the life cycle of the equine athlete. So I don't know what that number is. I think a priority should be on all sides, on all breeds, is some sire stakes program to encourage people to invest in yearlings. The other piece to all of this is ensuring that there's, at the end of the day, some kind of two-tiered system, which I think is critical going forward. The new model ought to consider having the premier racing operation, Woodbine, survive. That's key going forward. Frankly, nobody buys a $35,000 yearling to race in overnights at Western Fair. I think we're an important piece, the Tiered 2 system, the feeder tracks to feed the premier racing facility, but it's a model that needs to be synergistic. And I think the B-track system, however many remain, need to work with the A-track system. There needs to be that premier racing facility for people to want to invest in the business. And I think making sure Woodbine survives is number one.
Well, doesn't that then hearken to the idea of a centralized body to effectively run racing, maybe even take over a lot of the duties that the Racing Commission currently does? So the government is then completely divested of anything. But there has to be some integration of a centralized idea, stopping conflicts, maybe centralized race offices, centralized purse pool. I mean, you could go on and on.
Absolutely. That, I think, is a first start, is trying to create an understanding amongst the industry that there needs to be a central organization or alliance or consortium that begins working together, and that includes central race offices, and the list goes on and on and on.
So what's the first step to try and work towards that? Right now, racing is just sort of largely running around saying the sky is falling, which it is. What's the first step to move forward?
Well, I think the first step is to create that model, recognizing that the old model is gone.
And who drives that? Oriya?
And that will be, I'd like to think Oriya will, but it's difficult for Oriya, in fairness to them, because they represent all breeds, breeders, horse people, and racetracks. And as I said earlier, and I believe this, without a doubt, that everybody can't be kept whole. So it'll be difficult for Oriya to be the one making those decisions about who stays and who doesn't. So I understand the predicament Oriya is in, for sure. But I think people like myself may have an opportunity to share with government some thoughts on a new racing model that's built around parimutuel wagering, supporting live racing. But it's, in my view, it's a model that's dramatically different than what we see today. And still no guarantee that the industry will survive, but I think it's our best shot. So I think it's people within the industry providing leadership and having the courage to commit to a model and sharing it with government for their consideration.
So it sounds to me, if I'm expecting some big picture answers this calendar year, I might be disappointed. There may be some small incremental steps, but this new vision, if there is a chance for a new vision, it's going to take time.
It's going to take time, and time is not what we have. So you're right. And to think that we'll get a consensus on what that model should be is honestly, in due respect to the industry, delirious. It won't be something you get consensus on. But going forward, a couple things. We can no longer continue to fight amongst ourselves. We must begin very quickly to be focused on a market-driven approach to how we rewrite and rationalize this live racing model. Focus on the customer, and be prepared to come to the table, not with your own personal interests first in hand, but what's right for the industry, whatever's left of it come April next year.
What about the concept that's been tossed out from a couple of people and say, maybe it's time for racing to step up and become an equity player? If a track is thrown under the bus here, let's just hypothetically say Flamborough, for example, and racing says, you know what, we need Flamborough. So how about we put up some dough and we buy it?
Well, it's a blue sky thought. I mean, we might be more interested as an industry in leasing than we are buying or building, frankly, at this stage in our life cycle. But
excuse me, General, you pulled the slots out of Flamborough. What's it worth? Heck of a lot less than what Charlie Juravinski got.
Well, that's true. But for those who own that particular site, in due respect, they'd have to, the math would have to work for them. So I just don't know that any kind of racing consortium owning land and buildings is the right answer. Maybe a lease might make a little more sense. But I think the first order of business is getting agreement on what the live racing model looks like, who's racing when, and how many are left. I think that's more important at this stage than deciding how we might implement going forward.
Racing's had a great history of loving meetings. We love to meet. And the more the merrier in terms of the number of people in the room. I mean, I think most people look at, and I'm not singling them out, but I guess I am, the United States Trotting Association and Standardbred Canada. Their board is bigger than General Motors, respectively. Excuse me. Numbers don't mean anything. If we have this new model, you couldn't have a track representative from every track. You couldn't have all these different horsemen's organizations. Otherwise, you're back into like 20, 30 people by the time you get all the stakeholders. And are you in agreement that it have to be something much more concise?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The days of what we know are long behind us. I think going forward, it's a more compressed, contracted industry, and in my view, a lot less participation than we currently see, because what we currently see is not sustainable and supportable. So, and that comes with a lot of thought, me having to say that, and I know some of your viewers will think that's heresy, but I think we got to be really realistic about what's ahead. And the first step is once the grieving's over, is recognizing that a new day is ahead.
So, get over kicking the dust and stomping your feet. It's time to try and come up with first of all, you got to accept this is a done deal. Now, what can we do to move ahead with what we've got?
Yeah, I think we got to accept, not necessarily that this is a done deal, Harold, but I think we got to accept that the way things were is gone. That's the first step. I think there's still an opportunity to convince government that there's a sustainable parimutuel wagering model on live racing, but it's considerably contracted from what we currently see. I think so. I'm optimistic only because I think that enlightened people will come to realize that we're going to have to work together like we've never worked together before, and that'll have to be fewer around the table than ever before.
Just one parallel I was going to draw is New Jersey. New Jersey basically ended up in the hands and knees, and Jeff Gorell came in and basically became a benevolent dictator, for want of a better term. And he's more or less calling all the shots in that state in every regard. And, they're there. They're grinding away. maybe we're better off than they are, even in this new world, as you call it.
Well, I still think there's opportunities. I think the thing that that really needs to happen is who's ever left has to be like-minded. We have to share certain principles and philosophies if we're going to be able to work together.
And just to interrupt, do you mean by that, not to put you on the spot, but a track operator has to understand that if they get slots in the agreement, they have to include horse racing. They have to have some fair agreement. It's not just going to be a one-way street.
Well, it may not be inside the slot agreement. It may be exterior funding from the government. But I guess the point I'm making is that in order for us to survive, whoever's left, we got to be very like-minded. We got to be very much aligned on principles and objectives and our focus, our business focus. And if there's a group that's really production-driven and there's a group that's really demand-driven, that's going to be counterintuitive. It's not going to work. It induces conflict and confrontation, as we've seen for the last decade. So I think what's very important is those who are prepared to commit to trying to sustain some element of live racing in this province need to be all in line with certain philosophies and objectives and goals. And I think, frankly, we're going to have to put the interest of the whole ahead of the interest of the individuals.
And just to back up, just caught you on one point. I may be putting words in your mouth, but are you saying that it's possible that an agreement could be struck whereby racing doesn't share in the slot revenue per se, but they get revenue in a roundabout route
From another source? I think that those are my words. Yeah, I think I don't know that, but I think that I think there's a compelling argument that can be made to government, given all the economic spin-off effects and implications of this industry, if it were to cease. I think there's an argument to be made for governments to continue to support a live racing model, albeit contracted and consolidated. The OLG has its marching orders, and you have to respect the fact that they're accountable to the government. So they have to do what's expected of them. That's what their obligation is. And they to date have been focused on a gaming strategy that doesn't include parimutuel. So it seems to me, if that be the case, and that may not change, then we have to look at it from a different perspective and look to government for how we might co-fund a live racing model going forward.
You're pretty old for this kind of change.
Yeah, a lot of miles under me for sure. If I was a horse, I think I'd be in pasture. But it's an exciting, it's a great business, and it's painful to see it evolve the way it has. And there's no sense looking back and wishing you'd done this or wishing you'd done that. We are where we are. It's April 20th, 2012. We have to just deal with the realities ahead of us, and stop wishing for the past to continue, because it won't.
You sound a bit like Brian Burke at the Leafs.
He's a little more desperate than I am, I think.
Well, Hugh, you're giving us a lot to ponder, and thanks very much for sharing your thoughts.
Well,
and we'll see where it all goes.
Yes, we will, for sure.
Harold Howe with Hugh Mitchell, giving you the Harness Racing Edge.